Hello, welcome to our final day of the Staff University Christmas lectures. This morning I have Daryl Marples with me, and unfortunately no co-host this morning, but me and Daryl are going to have a little bit of a chat, and then we'll let Daryl go through with his talk. So good morning, Daryl. How are you?
Morning. I'm good today. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm excited for we've got quite a cool range of talks this morning coming through. But I just want to ask, like, before you get in about how experiences lead into experiences in virtual worlds, what's been your favorite experience working in this industry?
To be honest, this is where this talk's gone today. I started off when I came up with this title thinking about my experiences, what I've personally done, and the games that I've worked on. And actually, I got to realise that that was not my favourite thing. And the thing that I talk about the most is actually the experience that I've had via teaching. And I've been doing this a long time now. So, yeah, I think that's where the entire story went. And I started out with a title, and the title just got away from me. I'll talk more about that once I get into the chat itself. But yeah, teaching's kind of there's so many positives. I can't go to a games event anywhere in the UK without bumping into loads of my grads.
That's fantastic,
and many of them are in very senior positions now, and it's just really fantastic to know that we've laid the groundwork for that over the years. That the UK industry is huge, and there are the courses that the students have been on throughout the UK have really led to some really amazing careers and some amazing games as well.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic, and knowing that you've left that kind of that creative legacy, and how just seeing how being an educator, how that impacts the future generations is such a nice feeling to have, like that you had a part in that.
So that's exactly how I feel.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, I'll let you get started. If anyone does have any questions, feel free to ask them up in the chat, and I'll let Daryl take over. So, Daryl.
Thank you. So, as I just said to Ben, the title came before the presentation. So this is what I was going to talk about. And I started thinking about what are my experiences? Well, I've got a really varied background, and sort of like, there's tying the sort of like whole web of my career together was what I was originally going to talk about and how it led to this. But I've worked in all of these areas. So I've done everything from being an animatronics designer through to working on multiple video games and all of the other things that are listed there as well. But I started thinking about, well, do I talk about my experience in games? Well, that's really old now. I haven't worked actually in a games company for over 20 years. So that's kind of ancient history. And it isn't really the thing that I'm most proud of, as I just said. So I started to think, how do I go about talking about what I'm really passionate about? And then I realized that, I've taught so many people over the last 20 years. It's got to be way over 1,500 graduates at this stage. And as I said before to Ben, I just constantly bump into my graduates every event I ever go to, and they're all sort of doing amazing things. And I thought, well, I could talk about that. I could talk about that in the round. And I thought, well, that's still quite diluted. What could I actually talk about that would interest an audience that are thinking about getting into education in games and thinking about a career, and maybe just being really passionate about making their own games? So that's where I ended up. After coming up with a loose title, this entire slideshow is leading in a direction that it evolved into, which is how students still at university have these really amazing ideas, and can they do anything with them? Can they make those games become reality? So this isn't about me, it's about them. And I'm going to just show you some interviews that I've recorded with Rob and Gary and Ash and Nile, and hopefully you'll get a flavour of what's possible. It's a big old world out there, and without further ado, let's just play VT.
I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Hypersloth, and we've been responsible for a few things, but primarily we launched our first IP in 2015 called Dream.
So how did Dream come about?
So it was a university project, first and foremost, really. So I was at university in 2010, met a few friends there, and it was a weird one because we just loved doing game stuff as a hobby. So we spent our first summer away from the first year, sort of working and doing stuff, and then we did the same in the second year as well. And that was probably where the game, the idea sprouted. Is we treat our sort of semester off, after semester summer in like a business environment. So we'd work 9 to 5 on our PCs and sort of work together on a concept that Lewis, one of the other co-founders, had envisioned. And it was mostly, back then we were using UDK as an engine, so it was mostly like a visual exploration game. So it was quite a niche game at the time. You had like Gone Home and DRS for just popping up around about the same time we released. So I think we sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of being a niche product.
So how did you start development to that project then?
So we actually did it for university. So there were opportunities to take placements, but we decided, a lot of those places are generally more for specialization stuff. And we enjoyed doing all sorts of bits. So I would be doing some Unreal script, as it was called back then. So like small amounts of programming, 3D art, but I also liked designing and sort of developing and testing and prototyping things. So we decided actually, let's have a look at something called EPY, which was called Enterprise Placement Year. And they let you sort of build your own business with their support. There's a little bit of funding there which came useful, which I'll get into hopefully soon. But we essentially sat down together as a team of 3, and we sort of created a business plan, which was, hey, we're going to make 3 games in 1 year, and we're going to release them on Steam because everyone loves Steam.
Yep.
And we pitched it to EPY. They sort of came back at us saying, well, you need to go and consider this and this about business and how you're going to fund yourselves. So we went back and sort of revisited it, but ultimately we got, because it was quite a limited space, we got a position on EPY. So for our placement year, we built our business sort of from scratch with the support of EPY team at Huddersfield.
Cool, but yeah, 3 games in a year, very, very ambitious. So how did that go?
Yeah, well, we didn't make 3 games in a year. Interestingly, I went to lots of sort of talks and events, and what kept cropping up was people were saying in industry, something is going to take 3 times as long as you think it's going to actually make. And that became true for Dream. We actually only made Dream whilst doing EPY, and then we took an extra year out. So
2 years, 2 years,
yeah.
2 years to make 1 game rather than 1 year to make 3 games. Yeah, so
that's it.
So a 6-fold increase. Nothing major. Cool.
No, but there was a lot of learning along the way.
You did learn an awful lot, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about that? What did you learn along the way?
Well, it was it was just a roller coaster of a ride, really. I think we were very lucky and very fortunate in ways. So we were all friends primarily at university, but when it came down to business stuff, we were all sort of okay with being open and honest with one another, because essentially you can't run a business on friendship. So there were some awkward discussions about stuff. So it was learning how to deal with situations like that. It was learning how to actually be efficient with your time, because originally we only had that year to get it done. And it was also just learning how to run a business. So when we started off, we had no money. We were living off noodles.
I was just about to ask you about, so how did you fund the project?
So we got half of our student loan and no grant. So it was basically support from family. There was a little bit of obviously student grant there, which but we lived in the cheapest accommodation we could find. It wasn't very pretty. There was holes in the roof. We were living off noodles. But EPY gave us a couple of £100 to spend it as market research. So we took it to Eurogamer, and it was incredible. And from there, it just sort of took off. And then we got a publisher on board, and that's what helped sort of take us out of the bedroom we were living in. And actually, we ended up with a relatively modern office for a good year and a half, I think.
Yeah. So you ultimately finished the game within 2 years, which is, between such a small team, really commendable. How was it received?
So it did really well. So before we actually released the game, if we just backpedal a tiny bit, I think we were quite fortunate about how it received because of the way we went to develop it. So back then, to get on Steam, you would have to know a publisher or be with a publisher or know somebody at Steam. But we were fortunate that they were launching something called Steam Greenlight, which was sort of you could put your pitch decks on Steam. Users would vote if they want to see that game on Steam or not. And then if you got enough votes, you could then publish on Steam, which was great. So as soon as Steam Greenlight came out, we went on there, and actually we were one of the first. So it was games were greenlit in batches of 10, and we were in the first batch to get greenlit. So that
Amazing
was great.
luck. Yeah.
Yeah, so we ended up on lots of wish lists on Steam, which has been like the primary sort of selling point for us. So we actually did a bit of early access as well. So the community sort of helped shape the game, so that helped fund us even more, and we ended up paying off the publishers sort of dev costs before they paid us, which was nice. And to date, we've turned over just over $1 million, which sounds impressive, but when you consider, you've got Steam taking 30%, you've got publishers taking 40%, corporation tax, wages, a lot of it's gone, but it was still a really big amount of money for a team of 3.
Yeah, no, particularly considering you did all of that really whilst you were still students. So it's a remarkable story. So how did that impact the rest of your career? I mean, what happened with the rest of the career after that?
It's a weird one because it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but thinking about it, it was 8 years ago when we launched Dream. But it was good. I mean, because of the early selling of it, and we were able to take it to more events, we networked with people, and really it's been the networking that's helped sort of shape it. So after Dream, we launched a new IP, we got that signed with some new publishers, and we also did some freelancing work. So I worked on PC Building Simulator, a game called Pacer, and a couple of other bits. But there came a point where one of the co-founders left to do his own thing, which was great. We grew the team even more, and then we decided, actually, it's quite a stressful job. We either grow considerably and get somebody else to manage it, or we take a step back. And things happened. I won't get into too much depth, but life gets in the way for both of us running it, so we decided to take a step back. So because of those networking events, I know quite a lot of people in the industry, and it was I've had lots of people saying, well, come work for us, which is great. So I actually took one of them up on that opportunity, and yeah, it's great. I get to specialize a bit more in the areas I want to, but that generalist skill still comes over. And now Hypersoft sort of sits in the background and churns over a bit of money every year, which is nice. So I don't have to do any work for it. It's just when the Steam sales hit, for some reason, we still get loads of money. So it's a nice little end of year bonus for us.
No, that's terrific. Well, thanks very much for that, Ash. That was a really interesting chat.
Yeah, no worries.
So that was Ashley Stansel. The next interview. My next interview, is a completely different take. It's a student of mine that had an amazing board game idea and developed this in the first semester of his first year, which is another remarkable story. So I hope you enjoy this one too.
You'd like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Nile Crabtree, and I'm the founder and only designer of the board game publishing and development company Crab Studios.
That's cool. Can you give us a bit of background as to how you started that studio?
So when I was in my first year of university, I was given the task through a module called Concept Development 1 of making a board game. The only real parameters was it had to be casual and then also be played within 20 minutes, just so everyone could get their games played in playtests often. And I came up with the idea of a game called Blockers, which is a dexterity stacking game. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because at that time I was obsessed with watching those like cup stacking videos, and I was like, I wanted to create that sort of similar experience, and I thought it also fit the brief as well. And so once I brought that in, Daryl actually encouraged me heavily to try and pursue publication of the game, like to talk to manufacturers in China, in the UK, and just consider that route. And then that led me down the rabbit hole of Kickstarter, which was one way which I could get funding for all this. And after going through that whole cycle of development, crowdfunding, and publication and distribution, I had all the tools which I needed to create any game I wanted. And one of the benefits of that was I was particularly a student which excelled in design, but not really any other areas. So it was difficult for me to get my ideas to, well, not necessarily the table, but to like the computer screen, like by using Unreal or anything like that, because I wasn't particularly proficient in blueprinting. But one thing which I could do was I can make board games. And yeah, that was pretty much it.
Cool. So how successful was the first game, and what's happened to that game subsequently?
So initially it wasn't very successful at all. Actually, it failed on its first Kickstarter, but I don't necessarily think that's a failure necessarily, just because none of the ingredients were there for it to be a success in terms of like marketing, there's any sort of budget whatsoever. But on the second Kickstarter, second time around, it was a success. It only just funded, and I managed to be able to find a manufacturer which could make it at quite a low cost. It turned out that the quality of the game wasn't super great, but I was just happy to actually have made a game and it come all the way from China, and then I could distribute it to people that backed it. And that gave sort of the groundwork and a bit of credibility as well in order to start working externally with artists, because I ended up doing all the art for Blockers myself, and like they saw that I had made a game from start to finish, and that gave me the credibility that I needed. And that was kind of it for Blockers for a while, until relatively recently I got an email from just this random person who was working with the manufacturer at the time that made Blockers, and they were like, oh, we were going to make a game which is very similar to Blockers, but our manufacturer told us, which is very happy, not very happy, very like good of them because he didn't have to, that Blockers exists and I should contact you. And so the success in terms of financial, the financial aspects of it very much came much later from that deal, which resulted in a good amount of money going back into the company, and ended up making this game, which is called The Uzzle, which is, if you've seen Blockers, is very, very similar to that in terms of art style, and the gameplay is very similar as well. But yeah.
I think next thing I was going to ask you actually is just, so how many games have you released now, and what are you working on at the moment?
So release 3, the fourth one, which is sat behind me, is going to be distributed hopefully in January of next year, and that will be the fourth one. So yeah, I keep my games keep getting bigger and bigger as I go as well, because I'm getting more confident in the fact. That's the thing. The thing with board games, it's similar to video games in a way, just on a smaller scale. The more complicated the game and the bigger the game is, the heavier the game is, the more risk there is, because each unit costs more. If it's still going the Kickstarter route, the funding goal has to be higher. And even externally, I know I said Kickstarter, failing Kickstarter isn't a failure, but externally it does look like that. So you need to try and make smaller games and build up from there. And what I'm working on at the moment is actually the company so far has been very much a vanity publisher, in that it's all just been my games. But the next game is actually going to be from a student which I saw a lot of myself in, who also did concept development 1 because I was teaching at the time, and they made a game called Biomass, and I was just like, it would be criminal not to try and publish this game, because I also knew a lot of the sort of negative aspects of going through that experience, and a lot of stuff you have to learn, and I thought it would be nice to sort of save them from that as well. So, and that's going on Kickstarter, I think March next year. So, yeah.
Cool. So I suppose this isn't the end of the story either, because you're simultaneously running your own business, but it's also led to a career. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how the experience that you had made you a more rounded individual, more employable?
Yeah. So one thing which every single job interview I've had, the first thing that they always bring up, and the thing that they talk about the most about is my board games. The fact that I've made and published board games, done it all on my own. And they see a lot. Not only did they see a lot of like talent and work ethic from that, because it takes a lot of time and you have to develop a lot of skills in order to accomplish it. But also, I think it shows a lot of character as well, to be able to see through all of the trials and tribulations of that development process. So I mean, also another thing as well, it's kind of like a meme on LinkedIn that entry-level job requires 3 years experience and like a published title. And I'm not saying that all employers see a board game as a published title, but if they really, really like you, they can see it as like kind of a halfway house and treat it as a way to potentially get you through the door. I mean, in my last interview, which was for Team 17, it was supposed to be half an hour long, and we ended up talking for 90 minutes about all different types of board games as well, because the audience is getting wider, and hopefully as well, this is a bit of an outside chance, but hopefully the person interviewing you is actually into board games, and usually people are into board games like talking about them.
Indeed. Right. Well, thanks very much, Niall. That was really, really interesting. Thank you.
No worries.
Good luck in the future.
Thank you.
So that was Nile Crabtree. I hope you learned something interesting from that. Niall obviously, was very successful, and he'd managed to get things out relatively quickly. My next case study with Rob is a very different thing. He's taken a very long time to put the pieces together. So I really hope you enjoy this, because it tells a very, very detailed and interesting story.
So hi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I'm Rob Potter, and I've been making This Dead Winter for 4 years now.
Wow, time has flown.
It's been a long time.
Can you tell me where This Dead Winter came from?
Yeah, it came out of my final year of university, where I was just making it as a personal project and a small tie-in to my dissertation too, but ultimately it was a tech demo for snow deformation and locomotion, and I just liked foxes, so I put a fox in it.
And yeah, so that led in a particular interesting direction. So you decided that it was a project that was worthy of committing to in the long term. Can you tell us what happened in your head and what happened next?
Yeah, so at the time I was posting little bits of my work in Unreal Engine on Twitter, and it kind of died, but when I posted up this thing with the fox in the snow, it gained a lot of attention quite quickly, and I was like, oh, maybe I've got something here. And then it was 8 years later almost since its first inception, and I've kind of been working on and off it for a long time, but that's why I pursued it, because it gained a bit of attention, and then I enjoyed making this game about a fox. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff in between.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, so that's what I want to look at. So how have you, as an individual, managed to go from uni and take that project through to almost complete development? How have you done that?
Yeah, well, it is a long story, but ultimately it started with a scheme called Transfuser, which is UK Games Fund operated, and it was myself and a friend in a different team. We both applied to take part in it, and we were both accepted. And it's where you put your prototype in, and they assess if it's going to be any good, and then if they decide to take you on, they'll give you a little bit of money, and I can't remember how many months you get, but it's kind of like the summer just after you graduate, and you with this small pot of money you can have a tiny team, work on your prototype, and then the idea is you take it to EGX, where you show off this demo that you supposedly made anyway, and once that's done, then if it takes part in like a competition, all at EGX, where they judge it, and then you get given an even bigger pot of money if you win, or if you lose or become a runner-up. In my case, which I did, you take part in a accelerator scheme where they kind of put you through a different set of tasks and applications to get another grant. I ultimately actually didn't take part in that scheme and went on through a completely different route. But again, that's another story. But the inception is there was this scheme just at the end of university that I took part in, and it helped launch the very first prototype.
So you eventually went via Kickstarter?
Yes, yeah. So once once the transfuser scheme ended, I gave it a bit of a break. There was no funding for the game. I took up some contract work and just circled back round to it after I had a much needed break and decided that Kickstarter's going to be the route. Although actually I've missed out on a couple of crucial steps just after the transfuser scheme. The reason I dropped it was because I had a few publisher interests from the prototype, and I got so far down the line over the course of about a year with several of these publishers, and for various reasons, one of them was bought out and they cancelled their ongoing projects. The other one had a change of heart at the very last second with the contract in my hand, and so once both of these fell through, I took a break, and then I did the Kickstarter. I was like, you know what, just screw it. I'll do it myself. See what the people say, and that was thankfully successful.
Amazing. What a roller coaster. So
there's more to come.
so yeah, I was about to say. So post Kickstarter, you had some funding, and I suppose development continued. Do you want to lead us through that?
Yeah. So with the success of the Kickstarter, that gained more publisher interest, which is of course quite ironic, because at first, they don't want to hear about you, and then as soon as you show a little success, they come knocking. But thankfully, they're all quite nice, and the one that I ultimately chose to go with was very very kind, and really liked the project, and that funded myself even further, and so the game could become even more, because the Kickstarter funding, although was enough for myself, it wasn't enough to make the game quite as I would have envisioned. It would have got a certain amount of the way, and in some respects it probably would have been done by now. It would have been a much smaller game, but the publisher allowed me to get a team and an office, which is a whole thing, and take the game to an even higher standard and make it even bigger. But I mean, where do you want to go from after that?
So I guess where is it now, and how has it got to the stage that it's at now, and when, I suppose, the final part of that, you can answer all three together, is when do you envisage the project being finished and released? Yeah,
so the project now is in its final throes. Well, that sounds like its final death throes.
Yeah, it does,
actually,
yeah.
maybe we'll cancel that one out. But I'm nearing the very end. But what actually happened with the project is we developed it as a small team. There was about, with myself included, 4 full-time and another 3 or so contractors on sound and music. So it was, in the end, it was 1 programmer for myself, 2 artists, a character artist, an environment artist, and then an animator, and then the rest being contractors. So once we had the team together and the publisher, the game was getting fully fleshed out, but unfortunately the publisher got bought out, and their big overlord cancelled all the smaller publisher, my publisher, all their current projects, and so that they could redistribute the time of this smaller publisher. So I was caught in that maelstrom of a mess, and but fortunately, I was left with a small pot of money that I didn't have to pay back, which was quite nice. But I was still left in the lurch a bit, and that meant that I could pay the team for the rest of the year, and then had to buy out the remaining time from the office, which destroyed the budget, but did mean that everybody had enough time to find jobs, and then that just left me with pulling back the game together, all the strands that had gone off to make it this bigger project, and so kind of that's where I am now. I'm about 2 years post the publisher being bought out, and this whole time I've been pulling back, reining the project back in. and now we're looking to release it in 2024 with a undisclosed date.
But it's nearly there. It's nearly
Yes,
there.
yeah,
So-
very nearly.
Is it just a matter of polishing at this stage, or is there some major hurdles to overcome?
There are some larger hurdles. The world itself, it's a kind of like a semi-open world game, which it wasn't initially, which is kind of why the scope has increased so big. And so that has now kind of been all put in place, and I've got to put in all my other prototype puzzles and things that I've been playtesting and polishing, and those have all now got to go in the world properly, and it's all going to flow together nicely. And that's what I've been doing for quite a while. And so once that's all in, it's also got to be a bit more polished. So there is still a little way to go, but we are getting close.
It's quite a journey, though, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it is, and so many issues just they crop up all the time, as in any game development project. I think I'm sure everybody can relate who's listening, who's ever tried to make a game. So.
It's certainly something that we'll look out for, and sort of like hope it's it appears on Steam in the next 12 months. Oh,
well, you
fantastic.
can wishlist it on Steam. Just saying, yes.
Right, there you go.
Yes.
Nice little plug there. Well done. Thanks very much for that, Rob. That was fantastic.
That's quite right.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. It keeps me on the edge of my seat. I've seen that a few times now, and it's a really interesting way to go about publishing anything. My next interviewee has a more linear approach, and has managed to build an actual full-fledged studio, and I think it's a testament to grit and hard work on his part that this story is as interesting as it is as well. So I hope you enjoy this one too. So, hi. Would you like to tell us who you are?
Hello, my name is Gary Ashurst. I am one half of Sig Trap Games. I'm currently the art director and co-creative director on Undercover.
Cool. So we're not going to start with Undercover, Gary. Much as you wearing the t-shirt, and I'm sure you'd like to, we're going to start somewhere else. So can you tell me where your first game idea came from? So Sub-Level 0, what was the starting point for that?
Sub-Level 0 originated as part of a game jam. So back in 2014, I was invited to do some artwork for a game jam over a 72-hour period. I joined a couple of other people, including the co-founder, Luke Thompson, who I work with. And I think the theme was Beneath the Surface. So that basically inspired us all to start thinking about Descent, which was like an old 6-degree freedom shooter, sort of come after Doom, was relatively popular. Anyway, we thought we'd put a spin on it, add procedural level generation and power-ups and pickups and stuff like that. So we basically made a prototype as part of the game jam, and then we pitched it to publishers, and we got full development funding,
and you did
then brought it to market.
You did the started this essentially whilst you were still at uni, so you were still sort of like battling with the final year of a degree at the time. So how did that go?
I mean, it was intense, as you'd expect. Got my final year, as well as starting up a business and stuff. But there was lots of things in place, help from the university that I was at, to sort of help businesses get off the ground, a couple of grants and stuff like that. So it really enabled us to, I guess, hit the ground running with our first release, and it also paved the way for us to start looking into VR, because that was becoming a thing as we were developing the game.
Cool. So what went right and what went wrong with the development of that game?
Okay. So what went right? We released it. I think that's the biggest.
That is a
thing
major
went right.
positive. Yeah.
And it did well, kind of critically and commercially. I still check, Twitter, and I still read the reviews for it even now. It came out in October 2015, so I still kind of keep an eye on it.
But you
We've
did more
released
with it as
on-
well, didn't you? I mean, you released it on multiple consoles.
Yeah. So we did the initial release for PC, and then we did Xbox and PlayStation, and we did a box version for PlayStation 4, which was amazing. And I
Yeah,
got to design a signature edition, which had a collectible. It had the soundtrack in there. It had the game. It had a little art book, and yeah, we got to do that, and then we finished it all off with a Switch port as well. And then we also did like a full release of the VR version. So we spent a lot of time working on the VR version, and doing the consoles enabled us to. We did a big expansion alongside the console launch, so we sort of rebranded it slightly to Sub-Level Zero Redux, and that included new content. It also included a bunch of like quality of life changes as well, based on like reviews. So we were able to act on that and roll out this free update back onto all platforms, which was really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you know that was a while ago now. So the business still exists, and you're making new content. So how's the business progressed from there?
I mean, there's been ups and downs like a lot of businesses, but ultimately it's led us to where we are now, which is about to release our sort of second title called Undercover. All of our, I guess, development experience has gone into that. Our knowledge of VR and stuff. We've also done a lot of work for hire and kind of collaborating with other developers, sort of helping them bring their games to market as well. So yeah, we work on our own stuff, but we also work for other clients as well.
So
when we want
where
to.
will people be able to play Undercover when it's released? What will that be available on?
So the game is currently penned in for release on the 15th of February, and it'll be available for MetaQuest 2 and 3 at the moment. But I'm hoping we can bring it to other platforms in the future.
That's great. So what kind of game is Undercover?
So Undercover is let me get this right, VR co-op light gun arcade shooter. So if anyone's familiar with Time Crisis or Virtua Cop, House of the Dead, those types of shooter arcade machines,
On rails,
you see it.
Yeah.
So you're moving from cover point to cover point, and you're shooting enemies, and you're trying to score points, blow things up, shooting enemies while they're in midair in slow motion to sort of bank more points and up your multiplier. And then you're also trying to beat your friend as well, who's fighting alongside you.
And they can play anywhere on the planet, I assume.
Yeah, it's two quests, and you can play with your friends.
Don't have to go to the arcade together any longer.
Yeah. Yeah, just play from the comfort of our own home.
Yeah, fantastic. So when did you say that was out?
15th of February.
15th of February, right? Okay, awesome stuff. Well, thanks very much for that, Gary. That's great, and I wish you all the luck for the mid-February release.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers.
See how it goes. Thank you.
So that was 4 examples of students that I've worked with who've come up with amazing ideas, and over the years, you see hundreds and hundreds of projects and ideas, and there is always something unique and special about each and every one of these projects. And for me, the thing that's always made my job the sort of like most entertaining and enjoyable has been taking the students on those journeys and encouraging them to go on those journeys, and to sort of pull on those threads that talking to publishers, maybe sort of like thinking about how to raise funds. A couple of students there, or graduates should I say, talked about their experiences with Kickstarter. So how do you go about finding the funding to take your game out into the real world? And there are, some really tried and tested ways of doing that. So this started out as probably a talk that was going to be about me, and I realized ultimately that what I'm happiest doing is encouraging entrepreneurship in other people. So I hope you enjoyed that, and that is the end of my talk.
Well, thank you, Daryl. It's I think it's a testament to academics to show, it's one thing to say, I know what I'm talking about, and it's another thing to show, like living examples of this is where graduates have gone and this is what they've gone on to do. And I think making games is a dream for a lot of people, and just showing that it's a very achievable thing to do. It's just the reality of it can be difficult, and there are lots of surprising skill sets that you need to have. You can't just be a games artist. You need to know how to market, how to do your PR, how to talk to publishers, and even how sometimes that can fall apart, and how do you continue working through that, which is it's a lot to
No, I
think
think
about.
you're absolutely right. I think what you'll see very clearly from the examples that we've just gone through is that all four of those individuals are strong communicators. You can imagine them talking to publishers, and they're enthusiastic about what they're doing, and they clearly have a really solid knowledge of what they're trying to achieve. And I think that's a big part of the battle. You can learn software, you can learn tools, you can learn to code, you can learn to create artwork or produce music, and all of these things, but it has to all come together. So it's about communicating with publishers. It's about communicating within the teams as well, building a team that actually put all those pieces together. And that's something I've always been incredibly sort of keen to encourage.
What would you say what would be your expert advice to students or people that are just starting their academic career into games, that are wanting to make their own games or make an indie studio? What would be your I suppose it's hard to say what's the go-to advice for, because there was a lot of things,
but list of 50 things. I mean, get good, as they say, but I suppose the main thing, I guess, is always to have an idea that stands on its own merits. So, and what I mean by that is multiple things, I guess, encapsulated, but it needs to have an interesting visual style. Whatever you're doing, you're selling it via imagery in the first instance. You can't really sell a game purely based upon its mechanics, but the mechanics need to be there. So you do need to paint a picture of what the product is, what market it falls into, who's going to play it, why they're going to play it, why people are going to wishlist it on Steam or whatever. And as you can see from the examples I've just shown you, that they all talked about why they fitted into particular niches. Even Nile, when he was talking about him being obsessed with the stacking cups, the ideas don't come out of nowhere. All the ideas are always built on other concepts and ideas you've seen previously, but it's having your own unique take on it that's important, and following your vision of what that game is going to be, and ensure that if you feel that people want to play it, then you're probably onto something normally.
Yeah, it's like there are so many zombie survival games that exist. But if you look at something like Project Zomboid, that does it in a more of a survival, it really hammers home the survival element, and it's just that flavor of different that makes the game very enjoyable, right? It's not just another zombie survival game. There's extra elements to it. There's the roguelike element to it. There's the your survivor can die, and you can come find your survivor and kill them again, take the backpack, and it's having that unique bit, because it's very difficult to come up with a unique idea, right? But having that, what makes your game stick out from the crowd, what makes your thing, if it's a shooter, what's cool about your shooter other shooters don't have, right? Because if you're just going to make, Left 4 Dead again, it might not do so well.
I'm a big fan of game jams in particular.
Yeah.
A lot of very solid, interesting projects have come out of game jams, and the initial kernel of the ideas,
Mm-hmm.
even though polish takes, as you demonstrated here, polish can take years. Getting the core mechanics and the core interesting features down is something that can be done in the game jam context, which is invariably sort of a weekend or 72 hours, as Gary said. Baba Is You, if you've seen Baba Is You, is an incredibly interesting little puzzle game that was developed in a game jam initially. Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. That's another example of something that just pops up out of the blue in a game jam, and the core mechanics that underpin that are just genius. In both examples, actually, and that is what I think is interesting. I would encourage anybody that is ever offered the opportunity of doing a game jam just to seize that opportunity and find like-minded individuals that want to work with you and create those projects, because you never know quite where they're going to lead.
I mean, we have a living example of this right now. Like, if anyone is playing Lethal Company, that game was outselling Call of Duty on the Steam marketplace, and it's a very simple game. It's something that could be made in a games jam, and it's definitely something that here at Staffordshire University we have our collaborative games dev module. That's definitely something that our students have the power to make within a 9-week spread. So your game doesn't need to have all of this mind-blowing realistic graphics to be good. Your game just needs to be fun, right?
Clear, fun and playability are the absolute sort of like main things that you're looking for. Some interesting new mechanic that's delivered in a different way. Doesn't have to be completely unique. Puzzle games, shooter games, they're all in the mix. It's just doing something slightly new and twisting it a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. And finding the fun. Finding the fun is half the battle.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Daryl. That's been very eye-opening, and I hope it's been useful for anyone that is looking to pursue a career in games or looking to make a studio, just to kind of see what the struggles potentially would be, and also the fun and the satisfaction you can get, and that this is achievable. You just need to put in the graft. So thank you, Daryl, for your time. And thank you for everyone that has watched and has partaked in the Christmas lectures. We do have I'm going to go double check. We have Professor Esther McCallum Stewart up next, talking about a brief history of tabletop games and board games, and something about the rules of that game with houses. So we'll see you all there in 15 minutes, or 12 minutes. So if you're interested in game studies and tabletop board games, we'll see you all in 15 minutes. Thank you, Daryl, again.
Thanks, Ben.